I'm not gonna lie, I'm relatively bored with my gaming library right now, so I figured, you know what? Fuck it. How about I do something different and list 5 games or franchises that I would want to see return and be put in charge of recreating the motherfucker. And no, I don't give a shit what games the YouTube auditor wants because he can go fuck himself. Now, before I begin my list, I want to clarify what my criteria is, because I could probably reboot something like 10 to 15 franchises. However, I don't have fucking time to do a goddamn video for that shit. I wanted to get 5 good choices in this motherfucker with a lot of variety. The games that I chose needed to meet a certain criteria. So let me lay out the criteria that I set for this list. These needed to be games that have no imminent return in sight. In other words, these are pretty dead fucking franchises. There are no rumors floating around about reboots or remakes, or we know for a full fact the game isn't coming back for various reasons. Uncharted is a series that Naughty Dog has said has ended. Can you really imagine Sony not rebooting that? Come on, man. That's like their most popular franchise. You know that's just gonna come back at some point in the future. Shit, God of War was supposed to be over after part number 3, and then the prequel came out. Now we're getting a new God of War in a few months in this motherfucker. So the list of games is as dead as Kevin Spacey's movie career. Now, I want games that have not been on this console generation yet. Their last version was the prior console generation. So games like Mass Effect might not be coming back anytime soon because EA said that the last one was all fucked up. But I don't consider that franchise completely dead. Andromeda fucked it over, but I don't think EA is going to give up on it that quickly, and Andromeda was just released, so I don't consider Mass Effect part of my list. Another criteria that I wanted to avoid were solo games that needed sequels or a trilogy to finish off their franchises, or franchises that got killed off before a sequel could actually be finished. In other words, I want 3 games in their history, and I want somewhat of a logical conclusion to their story. Half-Life 3 is one of the most requested games that you can imagine, and the series has been absent for fucking years, but that's because Gabe Newell's a fat, pretentious bag of hot shit. Chrono Trigger was a game that I wanted to put on this list. As a matter of fact, it probably would have been number 1, but with only Chrono Cross as a partial sequel that really wasn't a sequel, I didn't want to include that one on this list. There are games which never got a follow-up, like Alan Wake, Grim Fandango, Heavenly Sword. I want franchises, not just games that could have used a sequel but didn't get one. And the final criteria that I have, games that I like. I don't want to hear shit about the games that you think should be on this list, because I titled the video the 5 games that I wish that I could return and that I want to take by the balls and create by their own. Not 5 games other motherfuckers want to return. Hey look, if you want a game to return, you make your own goddamn list of some shit like that. So, without further ado, here's my list. Starting with number 5, NCAA football. I miss it. I really do. I've said this before and I will say it again. College football had a completely different feel compared to Madden. Sure, the mechanics are the same. Football gameplay is virtually the same. Running plays are the same since it all shit comes down to the same engine. But the difference is the atmosphere of college football, where cupcakes can rise up to be a superpower, where you can stomp the shit out of Alabama and Ohio State into the ground each year and prevent them from being a dynasty, to the turnover of your rosters. You know, players graduate every 4 years, 3 if you have a superstar declaring for the draft. Unlike the NFL, where parity exists, and anytime you can go from the basement to the penthouse in just a matter of years, well, except for the Cleveland Browns, of course. They perpetually suck, so they're fucked. But it seems like the Rams and the Jaguars, they've been awful for the past 6 or 8 years, and now they both won their divisions. They were fighting for a spot in the Super Bowl. The Packers thought they would have always been fighting for a division with Aaron Rodgers. That is until he gets injured and their season turns to shit. The 49ers went from Colin Kaepernick leading them to a Super Bowl to having one of their best players retire early in Patrick Willis, and then right back to the basement of the NFC West. Now they have hope again with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback. College football, that's multiplied, because every 4 years you have a brand new team. Every superstar you send to the NFL in 3 to 4 years needs to be replaced immediately. It's not like having Tom Brady on your team for 18 fucking years or Ben Roethlisberger leading you to the playoffs every year. College football is a different animal. But what I really miss, honestly, the shit that I really want, is the off-season stuff. You know, in Madden, you basically needed money. That's it. If you have enough money, you can sign whoever you want at the right price. That's the extent of building your roster. Plus the draft with randomized rookies that they would actually give you in the game. College football, though, is all about recruiting. And the final NCAA game that was made allowed you the ability to recruit all year long with stadium visits and whatnot. They really went all out and they improved the recruiting tool, and probably could have improved it even more with a couple more games. Madden rosters change dramatically each year. From veterans retiring to rookies being added to free agency, college has that, but you're not worried about having the most accurate roster, since that's the point of the recruiting tool. You build up your program, you win as many awards as you can with your players, and then if you want, you can change schools, take a better job at a different university. Ultimately, NCAA offers up more options than Madden in how you become the owner of your team, or in the case of college football, obviously, the coach of your team. Unfortunately, this is a game that's not coming back anytime soon due to all the legal issues, lawsuits, schools, and the NCAA not wanting to have to deal with the financial ramifications of all these potential lawsuits. It's easier not to make the game and avoid lawsuits than to continue forward after losing a number of legal battles. The NCAA's archaic, ridiculous rules fuck over any chance of this game coming back. But if I had to choose a sports game to come back, this is the motherfucker that I want. On top of all the pageantry, I would add all the features like team violations, recruiting violations if you persist past the rules of the game, week-by-week practice to improve your player ratings, a lot more injuries to occur in the game, accurate injuries to occur in the game, energy levels so that you can see if you're using a player too much or too little. I want improvements on recruiting, how to land recruits, hiring your coaches, down to the position coaches like linebackers and wide receiver coaches and shit like that. Walk-ons, so you can add that European soccer player as a kicker who flops if someone runs into him on the football field. I want real world shit, man. I want all of that in my version of the NCAA game, so that's why that one tops my list at number 5. Number 4, Contra. Now, unlike the other games on my list, this is the only one that I don't have footage for, so I had to swipe some shit. Anyone as old as me knows the Konami code. They know up, up, down, right, left, B. A select start, if you want the 2-player in the motherfucker. It's one of the greatest video game Easter eggs of all time, and I would actually bring that shit back. Now, Contra doesn't need to be a AAA game. It doesn't need to be Call of Duty, Battlefield. It just needs to be Contra. 2 dudes from the 80s movies like Stallone and Arnold shooting a shitload of aliens and saving the Earth for some shit-awful invasion. Release this as a downloadable game. I don't give a fuck. Keep it simple with some 2D side-scroller action, some 3D open-world levels, tons of aliens, tons of guns like the classics such as the spreader, the flamethrower. Throw in some alien shit like lasers, giant fucking rockets, and recapture the magic of the old 80s world of Contra. Nostalgia is always a fantastic way to get people to buy games, and as a matter of fact, I have a future video that's going to come up talking about nostalgia, all the upsides and the downsides of it. But with Contra, this wouldn't be a game that just brings back the series for like annual installments like Call of Duty. You know, dumping millions of dollars into that motherfucker. No. It's a game that needs top-notch controls. It needs good movement and gunplay. Difficult as shit aliens with cool boss fights at the end. A variety of levels like a side-scroller level, top-down action, third-person stationary camera angle, maybe some driving and flying missions where you can fuck shit up. This basically just needs to be a fun game. It does not need to be a masterpiece. It just needs to be shit where you could blow a motherfucker up. Oh man, the fun I could have making this game if Konami gave me the reins to make an updated version of this game. Number 3. SSX. Now, I really debated about putting this game on the list. I was really between this one and Chrono Trigger. However, I can't really tell if this franchise is dead or not. It certainly seems that way because the last SSX game we got was 6 years ago in 2012, and the sales were relatively low, and the reception was average at best. Since the game came out of EA's Vancouver office, that's their largest office with the biggest staff, you have no idea what they're working on at any particular time. You have no idea if they have a game in the pipeline or not. But when you consider they pump out NHL every year, they produce the Need for Speed games recently, it's hard to know what they actually have in their pipeline. So, had SSX sold well in 2012, I think we would have seen a sequel by now, but the fact that it didn't sell well and it didn't have a long life after its launch, I have a feeling that they're not going to be making this game anytime soon. So I'm going to include it on my list of games that I would love to see back, and I want it to be the modern day SSX Tricky. Bring back all the popular characters like Mac, Eddie, Zoe, Elise, Moby, Simon, and then obviously you add the new people. Go back to all the fun stuff that made SSX Tricky and SSX 3 amazing. You know, all the tricks, all the uber monster tricks and shit like that. Have races down the mountain, have scores to beat. Then the smaller events, like the Big Air and Super Pipe events. Have online competition from the start. Be able to play against your friends. Be able to knock a motherfucker on their ass when you want. That's some shit that I really miss. You remember that shit? You would be able to knock the computer on his fucking ass and then you would get your superpower. I want that shit, man. I want kid-friendly scoreboards. I want to rework the scoring system so stupid shit like those, tiny 360 jumps don't keep your score multiplier going on a run. Now, don't get me wrong. I would keep the score multiplier, but I'd keep it in its own game mode. But just the runs, I want the scores of the individual tricks and what you can do one trick into another. Having special in-air combos, whether it's inputting buttons or moving the sticks around to create a character's unique move that only they can do. I want to give the characters their own stats and events that they excel at compared to other riders, like making Mac the half-pipe specialist, while Zoe might be the big air specialist. Different boards that increase your stats or abilities to improve your character. There is plenty of potential still with an SSX game when the shit is done right. What was done in 2012 was a half-ass version, and that's why it sold like crap. You add in the online multiplayer, you add in the ability to play with your friends and knock their fucking asses to the ground, you take away all that stupid flying shit, that miner's helmet with a fucking flashlight on top of that shit, get rid of all that crap. Go back to the old days of big air, big tricks, tons of fun with the game, and crazy and wild personalities. That's what would make SSX sell again. Number 2, and this one should be no secret, Marvel Ultimate Alliance. There is undoubtedly better comic book video games out there. The Batman series, the upcoming Spider-Man game from Insomniac looks fucking amazing. Square Enix has an Avengers project coming up, and even the goddamn Lego games are creating Marvel right now, and they're a big hit with all the players and the critics. However, how many of these games capture the roster and RPG nature of what Marvel Ultimate Alliance and X-Men's Legend accomplished before that? Not too many of them. Now, all the games on my list have multiple entries to their credit. Marvel Ultimate Alliance technically only has 2, but the game really is an evolution of the X-Men Legends series, which was basically the same fucking game, just with different characters. Instead of just having X-Men characters, now we have the whole Marvel roster to be able to add whoever you wanted to the game. Most people who played all 4 consider those to be in the same family of games. I would go all out for this game, keeping it in the same style, a top-down button masher with 4 characters, with couch co-op. Yes, couch co-op needs to come back on top of the online capabilities. Get an enormous roster of characters from the very beginning, like 40 fucking characters you can choose from, and of course DLC afterwards, adding some other characters and shit like that. The characters would all need unique moves, and not just the same reskin moves that Marvel Ultimate Alliance use, where, the Hulk smash and the thing smashing the fucking floor is the same goddamn move. No. I want the good shit. And I would also take a story straight out of the pages of Marvel and add that to the game. Either Secret Invasion or the Annihilation storylines would work, because that would bring multiple characters together against one common enemy. Personally, I like the Secret Invasion because I would introduce a mechanic where a random member of your selected team could be a Skrull and you wouldn't know it. And each time you start the game, multiple random characters would be designated as Skrulls and have branching endings to the games based on which characters were randomly selected. Oh man, this shit would be fantastic. Imagine that. You're playing through the whole game and you find out at the end of the game Captain America was a fucking Skrull. That'd be goddamn awesome, man. Imagine you find out it was Spider-Man that had that ability. Meanwhile, you use them almost the entire game. Yes, that would be a cool mechanic that I would want to use, which is why I would look at Secret Invasion as more the game that I would want to use. So seriously, Activision, give me the reins on this motherfucker, because I could easily knock this shit out of the park. With Marvel's current appeal, fans' appetites for anything Marvel at this point is at an all-time high. This would be fucking gold. Marvel games and Marvel movies would sell out in a minute. And once you produce a quality game, you give the characters all the powers that they have. You make the Hulk the Hulk. You make Captain America Captain America. You give Iron Man all his powers, and you put personality into the game. You could create a fantastic Marvel Ultimate Alliance game, and I would love to be in charge of that motherfucker. And the final series that I would want to bring back, number 1, Resistance. Yes, motherfucker. Insomniac's Resistance series that they gave up on us years ago. I feel bad for the Resistance series. And you know why? It's because the game never really had an identity. Between the first game to the second game to the third game, for whatever fucking reason, Insomniac changed the flavor of each game every time they went to the next sequel. The first game had its own flavor, Resistance Fall of Man. It was unique. It was one of the PlayStation 3 launch games, although I think it launched like 2 or 3 days after the actual launch of the console. Whatever. It was in the launch window. It was one of the few decent games that PlayStation 3 had at the time, and it had a fantastic idea, an alternate history to World War II, where instead of fighting fucking Nazis like we've seen in every other game, aliens came and invaded, and we had to fight off aliens because they were taking us and turning humans into aliens. Part 2 then released, Part 2 had one of the most fantastic co-op games of all time. I will constantly say that. Just the performance alone of what that server can do, where you can have 60 players online in multiplayer, 8 people playing co-op, and very few lag issues to the game. It was utterly stunning what that game could do. The problem with Part 2 was that Call of Duty became the most popular game at the time. Every game tried to emulate Call of Duty. So what ended up happening, the creators of the game, Insomniac, decided, you know what, let's take Resistance and turn it more into Call of Duty. So they took away a lot of the features that made Resistance 1 popular and tried to turn this more into a Call of Duty game. Finally, you get to Part 3. Part 3 down the road, I think they just didn't give a shit at that point. Fans weren't happy with Resistance Call of Duty. They didn't like the fact that you couldn't do the wheel. They didn't like the fact that you couldn't do the energy, where if you dropped energy packs, you actually healed yourself, as opposed to just the natural healing that you got in like Call of Duty games. They wanted something that felt more like Resistance. On top of that, the ending of Part number 2, spoiler alert, the main character dies, they didn't know what to do at the start of Part 3. They just kind of slapped some shit together and they're like, you know what? We really didn't think this fucking thing through. They completely ignored that hybrid race in the game. I forgot the fucking name of them, but they were in the backstory or some shit like that. We never actually saw the motherfuckers. And then they just kind of let the series go. One of the things that Insomniac has always been known for is their fantastic gun ideas. From the Ratchet and Clank series, they always came up with creative gun ideas. And Resistance had that. The problem is, once they tried to go Call of Duty route, it kind of lost that flavor. So what ended up happening was this game really had no identity from Resistance Fallen Man to Resistance 2 all the way to Resistance 3. Here's what I would do. There's 2 ways in which I would bring this game back. Number 1, just completely reboot the motherfucker. Go back to the beginning, start that shit all over again, and have a plot from game number 1 all the way to game number 3, or whatever the fuck you want to go more than that past the trilogy. But essentially, you have to have an identity to the game. Keep the weapon wheel that you had, keep the health energy packs that you need, keep all the things that made the game unique within the game, and keep within the storyline. If that doesn't work, the second thing you can do is follow up to what happened. Now, in the game, it seems at the end that Capelli finally beat all the Chimera. They were able to fight back the virus, knock that shit down. Hey, human survivor, we're going to have a prosperous future in this motherfucker. However, how about you have the game come back 30, 40, 50 years down the road? Humans have been rebuilding. We've rebuilt the planet. We've almost come back to what we were supposed to be in terms of technology and whatnot. However, down the road, the Chimera have returned. They've come back stronger, harder. They figured out how to get around humans. They figured out how to stop building fucking towers that humans could break down and beat. Oh man, how fucking stupid was that? Every fucking game we had to go in the goddamn tower and just knock the tower out and we won the fucking game. Oh, I ain't gonna get into that shit, man. Essentially, you could pick it up in the future, or you could just totally reboot the start of this motherfucker. I personally would pick it up in the future. I would like to start as like a Resistance Part 4. Show what happens in the future after the virus comes back. Show what happens now that the Chimera have gotten smarter and they figure out how to counter all of humans' attacks that they could come with. You could really make a fantastic game down the road. However, you have to have an identity going in. You have to have an identity in game number 1 all the way to game number 3. That was the biggest problem that Resistance had, and that's what I would add to the game. On top of that, go back to co-op. Oh, motherfucker, I need Resistance 2 co-op back in my life again. Whatever the fuck server Sony used on that game, bring that shit back, motherfucker. That shit was excellent. I would obviously tune their co-op to be a little bit more modern compared to what it was before. I mean, literally, you could just stand in the same fucking spot and beat all the goddamn enemies. But essentially, I would improve on what they had years ago because that was an excellent co-op multiplayer. So there it is. These are the 5 games that I would personally want to bring back. Obviously, if you guys agree with the list or you don't agree with this, I don't give a shit. No, seriously. In the comments section, you guys can let me know which of the games you would love to see brought back from the dead, or games that you would like to see me put in charge of, because I would love to see what you guys think of what I could be put in charge of. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.